Welcome to the Jenny Weeks podcast. I am thrilled to be hosting today because with every episode, we truly strengthen our listeners' relationships with money. We build further clarity through shared experiences and become more deliberate with our financial decisions. As we work towards that clarity, please remember that this show provides financial education and inspiration only. It is not intended as a personal investment, legal, or tax advice. Please consult with your own team of professional advisors before making any financial decisions. And also, thank you to our sponsor, Springtide Wealth, providing clarity and choice through financial transitions. Check out our website at www.springtidewealth.com. If becoming financially savvy is important to you, then you should be listening to this episode today because estate planning is one of the core foundations of financial planning. There's a possibility you're going to inherit someday, which has financial implications. And of course, you're also going to have to leave your estate to your family or friends one day. This should be important to you. And today you're going to discover why. But before we begin, I want to ask you something. Are the choices that you are making supporting the life you want? Do you worry that you might not have it all figured out? Are you using your resources to create meaning? Are you aware of all the opportunities to create, grow, and make a difference with your wealth? Are you consciously creating your best life? I encourage you to think deeply about our topic today and how you can have a positive impact within your family's legacy. So today we are joined by Nicole Garton. She's been a lawyer since 2001, co-founding Heritage Trust in 2018. Nicole is recognized by Best Lawyers in Canada for Trusts and Estates and is the past chair of the Canadian Bar Association Wills and Trust subsection. She is a trust and estate practitioner, a chartered mediator, and a certified family enterprise advisor. She's also a legal consultant in the Lindsay Kenny LLP's family and estate planning and litigation groups. As you can see, we're very lucky to have her today. I am so excited to welcome Nicole Garton here today. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you.
Nicole, I've already done your intro before you were here, so everyone knows how important you are and how successful and how experienced you are more than anything. But tell us a little bit about why you founded Heritage Trust and a bit about your journey as a lawyer into the trust and estate business.
Well, thank you. So I am experienced. I've been practicing law for over 25 years. Sometimes I'm shocked by that. But I have worked with hundreds of families during major transitions, like whether it's divorce, whether it's death, whether there's a significant conflict in their lives. So I have many years of experience of helping real people deal with these issues. About Heritage Trust. So I was practicing and I did, at that time, my practice was about half wills and estates, about half family law. And a significant percentage of people needed some sort of professional executor or trustee. So an example might be maybe someone was single, or it was a couple and they never had children, or maybe they have a disabled or vulnerable child, or maybe the kids all lived overseas. Maybe there was a business, maybe someone was First Nations and there was complexity, or maybe there was conflict. As we know, conflict is part of life and very common. So for those people, there is a role to have an independent professional entity act as executor of a will or power of attorney under an enduring power of attorney instead of a family member for the neutrality and the professionalism and the continuity. And in the marketplace at that time, the majority of professional trustees and executors are bank affiliated trust companies. So examples might be Royal Trust, BMO Trust, Scotia Trust, and they actually do an amazing job, but they have often thresholds. Like, so for example, if a trust or an estate is under $1 million, for example, most, if not all of those bank affiliated trust companies won't just simply won't take that matter. So that's a lot of Canadians that were left out of that needed service. And so I like a template client would be, and this is somebody that I helped. So she was a widow. She had about 800,000 condo, small RSP, and she had one child that lived in the US. And so if you have a US resident child, there's lots of reasons why they probably shouldn't be an executor or trustee. And then she had another child that was a Down syndrome son. And so it was about 400,000 that needed to go into a trust for that son. And the difficulty is it was far below the threshold that the sort of bank affiliated trust companies would take. So she had nobody to assist her. And so from that, I had the idea to start an independent trust company, and we would have no limits. So our asset limits. So what we do have are minimum fees. And so we have minimum fees that are sort of break even. So if somebody can pay our minimum fees, we'll take them even if they have 100,000 versus $1 million. So we offered that as a service. And so that was about 10 years ago. So I started Heritage Trust with a local accountant named Brian Doherty. And then at the beginning, it was quiet. So it's a unusual business in that we don't actually start earning revenue until people actually pass away or become disabled. So a lot of people will appoint us, but it can take years before an estate falls in. That's sort of the euphemism in the industry. That means somebody's passed away or become disabled. So it was kind of quiet at the beginning. And then it started to get busy. And about 2 years ago, I ended up with two full-time jobs because I had a full law practice and a full um, trust company business. And so there's a nice mid-sized firm in BC called Lindsay Kenny. They very graciously took conduct of my law practice. And so for about 2 years, I've run Heritage Trust full time. So we are independent. So we're not affiliated with any particular financial institution. So we're neutral. So if somebody wants to stay with Dominion Securities or they want to stay with, your company, Jenny, we don't move the financial institution. We just make sure that the clients are well served. And we work with people's existing teams, their existing lawyer, their existing accountant. And we will take people that have smaller estates and we will take people with larger estates. And so we don't have any asset limits. And maybe I'll just mention our minimum fees. So our minimum executor fee is 15,000. So if somebody it used to be 8,000, but then we realized we were losing money hand over foot, finished at 8,000. So we've increased it to 15. So if somebody can have 15,000 in an estate, we will act as their professional executor. And our minimum annual trustee or power of attorney fee is $5,000 a year. So if somebody can pay $5,000 a year, we will be their trustee, we'll be their power of attorney. We have no limit.
Amazing. You said so many things there. And I can only imagine that, for many people that are listening, they're going, wow, like, how much do I not know about this, about estates, right?
Right.
And, I preface this at the beginning that estate planning and your estate is a core foundational piece of financial planning. And that is because we're all going to die, one, and most of us are also going to inherit. So you're gonna face it possibly twice. You're really fortunate if you inherit later in life in some ways, because it means your family's lived longer. And what I find so interesting about talking about estates is that I have found getting clients to create their will is like pulling teeth. Why do you think people avoid getting a will or even having discussions about estates?
So I have thoughts about that. So there have been a number of like surveys and studies in Canada, and they all sort of have the same finding, which is roughly half of Canadians have done no planning, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. So half the people walking down the street haven't done anything. And, maybe I'll just do a little pitch. Everybody, whether you're 18 or 88, should have a basic will, a basic enduring power of attorney. So a will is if you pass away, who's going to, be in charge of your body, who can make funeral arrangements, who can deal with the bank, who can file your tax return. Even if you don't have a huge amount of money, it's a very significant logistical hurdle if you don't have an executor because no one has authority to deal with anything. Similarly, everyone should have a basic power of attorney. So if you have an accident, if you get dementia, you have a stroke, something happens, you're unable to manage your finances or legal matters. If you don't have that simple document in place appointing an individual or maybe a company, nobody can do anything. Like nobody can like pay a bill, they can't access your bank account, they can't fill out forms. And that can be a very stressful, expensive, time-consuming thing to fix. So and then everybody should also have a healthcare agreement. So if there's different names for it depending what province you're in. So in BC, it's called a representation agreement. In other provinces, it's called a healthcare directive. But it's basically a power of attorney for your body. Like if you cannot make healthcare decisions or you're not able to communicate them, who is a legal decision maker and do you have particular wishes? So critical, half of people have done nothing. So I think so I have a lot of theories about this because I deal with this so much. So I think number one, as adults, we all procrastinate the things we know we're supposed to do, right? Life is busy. We're racing, just, trying to work, take care of kids, aging parents, survive. And, there's the annoying adult things we're supposed to do. We're supposed to go to, maybe get our teeth cleaned or our car serviced or get our will done. So I think, we know it's important, but we're just like racing to like, keep our heads above water day by day. So I think number one, we all procrastinate. But I think number two, I think what happens is there's a bit of perfection paralysis because I think people think, okay, this is really important. I wanna, do absolutely the right thing. Maybe like, people start researching, they get overwhelmed, maybe they don't know where to start, and so they get stuck. But the unfortunate thing is if you die without that planning, it's gonna be 100% not what you want, right? So what I encourage people is rough and ready is 100% better than nothing at all. So even if you go to a local notary, go to a lawyer, or even use one of the online tools called Willful or something like that. Just having a basic plan in place is going to be 100% better than not having anything. And then once you have those building blocks, it's really easy over time to refine and improve and work with it, like because you've got the momentum. So don't let that perfection paralysis stop you from protecting yourself and your family if you suddenly were incapable or if you died.
Okay, I love that. I love that. I think that's a big takeaway. I hope everybody listening heard that, rough and ready.
Mm,
Uh, I have one other perspective around this, because one of the other things I've learned during this podcast is how important it is to have a cohabitation agreement before you get married. And I think the thing that people don't understand is by not getting a will done, you are not having a say and you're falling under laws, right? So your estate will be distributed. You just don't have any say in it.
mm,
And it's similar to when you're getting married. You still fall under these laws. You just aren't having any say in it.
mhm,
So I just kind of want to reiterate that it's no different in this area. Um and I like rough and ready. I think get something done, start your learning journey. I think that's great advice.
mhm.
I have another piece. Why do you think our culture is afraid to talk about death and inheritance? Well, that's assuming that it is. I believe that it is. I know with my clients that are older, it's still very difficult to have those conversations with them and for them to have them with their families. So, why do you think that? And do you see a difference also between how men deal with estates versus women?
So I do. So I have thoughts on both of that. So I think in our Western modern culture, um, there's a big amount of avoidance and denial. So I think even like 100 years ago, I think death was people died at home. It was we didn't have the medical interventions that we have now. Death has become kind of sanitized in a way. Like people die inside hospitals away from families. And I think, we have this weird sort of youth obsessed, individualistic culture. And I think I think partly it's a cultural thing. But I think, the here's what I say to people in that I think trying to have existential question, like sort of thoughts about mortality and legacy and death, like I'm not saying that's not critically important and part of the human journey because it is, but I'm adverse to it in estate planning because it might slow you down. so, so what I like, so back to the rough and ready thing is it's like existential questions of mortality and meaning, critically important. But I don't like it if it's gonna like stop you from getting your documents done. So what I say is like, yes, that's important and have that journey, but go back to that annoying adult checklist and that just get the business stuff done, right? Like who's gonna be your executor? Who's gonna be your power of attorney? Who's gonna get your money? Like get it done. And those legacy questions are critically important, but please don't let that stop you from getting stuff done. So I end up having sort of you can use humor and things like that, but just, focus on action. And
Mhm.
the larger cultural questions about why we're so death denial is a bigger one and maybe a good one for faith and philosophical leaders. And I actually am interested in those topics. I want to write a book about it, but
Mm.
I don't want it to
Well,
stop people from getting it
well,
done.
and I'm sure
Yeah.
you deal with that, right? When you're talking about estate planning.
Right.
I wanna jump into something here. I've got a little bit of research. So there was a 25-year study of 3,250 wealthy families conducted by the Williams Group. I just wanna quote that. And it revealed a striking statistic that 70% of family wealth transitions fail by the second generation, 90% fail by the third. Critically, the research found that the breakdown almost never stems actually from the bad advice, market volatility, or legal technicalities. Instead, 60% of failures are caused by a breakdown of communication and trust. 25% are due to inadequately prepared errors, and less than 3% were attributed to poor financial, tax, or legal planning. Is this consistent with your experience?
So it is. And you know what's funny is we're doing this.
Hmm.
That study, this was the book. It's
Oh,
funny. I have it
oh,
right on your desk. There you
oh,
go.
there you
Preparing
go.
errors. So that was the book that presented that study. So basically what they said is like when things go wrong, it's not usually because of tax or investment like errors. It's because families aren't talking to each other. And I would actually say like don't think this is just for the wealthy. I think this is for everybody. So it's kind of like general concepts of parenting and that to grow full actualized people, it's a long conversation. You know what I mean? So there's things about conversations about, what are our values as a family? What is our history? What are the things that are important to us? And if we've built a business or we've managed to save wealth, like what was the story of that and what does it mean to us? And the thing about wealth conversations is wealth is more than just money. So there's quite a well-known guy named Jay Hughes that is sort of famous in this area. And he came up with like the four types of capital. And so there's like human capital, which is the people in your family, like their health, their character, and well being. There's intellectual capital, which is your accumulated gifts, but that's really only one form of wealth. So families that thrive across generations and think about wealth in a more holistic way. So there is an estate planning author named James Hughes Jr. He's very famous in this area, and he has a concept of that there's four main kinds of wealth. So there's, of course, financial wealth, which is, your property, investments, and money. But there's human capital, which is the people, like their health, their character, their well being. There's intellectual capital. So that's your life experience, education, life lessons. And then there's social capital. So that's how your family engages with each other and the bigger community. And then there's spiritual capital. So, what is your shared purpose and meaning and the values that tie generations together? So, whether you're passing on an equity in a house and an RSP, or maybe you are passing on a family business, or you've managed to generate significant wealth. It doesn't matter if it's, 50,000, 500,000, 5,000,000. The concepts are the same in that you want to be having these long-term conversations with your family, and that, what is our human capital? What is our intellectual capital? What is our social capital? And you want to build wealth stewardship. So you want to make sure, and we don't teach this very well, but what's good financial hygiene? Like, what is budgeting? What is basic investing? What is asset allocation? And like try to save for 6 months of expenses in case of emergency. Like those basics are critical. But then you also want to think about, the humans and what we've learned, and what it means in a larger community, and what our spiritual capital is. And so when the older generation dies and leaves wealth, whether it's financial, intellectual, social, or spiritual, that the next generation, there have been decades of conversations and training and learning. And so you're able to retain that wealth, but the whole holistic wealth, not just the money itself.
Wow. That was like off the tip of your tongue. That was impressive. So I have a term that I use, and it's so amazing what you just said, because part of the reason I'm doing this podcast is that I believe that wealth is a resource,
Mhm.
right? It's, and I think sometimes we get confused, and it's a resource, right? It's a tool,
It's
and
a
it's how our
tool,
economy runs.
right?
And we have an opportunity to allocate that. So you're talking about all the different levels of capital. And that's exactly it. You have this tool, this resource that you have an opportunity to collect and then distribute for yourself, right? And being conscious about that is what is important. Knowing that day to day, year to year, all the decisions that you're making are conscious rather than unconscious throughout your lifetime. Um, and this estate piece is obviously a very large part of that. And I have one other comment, which is that, advisory practices like myself and yours to a certain extent are now competing with robots and, the wealth simples of the world. But in those arenas, you're not getting this conversation, right? When you're sitting down with a proper estate planner and financial advisor and talking through the whys and the history, and that ability to have um, an experienced neutral party take your family through that conversation, to ask those questions, to help them see the consciousness of the decisions that they're making and the awareness around it. Um, so I love that. I love that we brought that into the conversation. Have you heard of sudden wealth syndrome?
I have. And so this would be, somebody that hasn't, you know, parented, and I mean that in a global way, but that there hasn't been that stewardship training, right?
Exactly.
So whether, somebody dies suddenly, or there's a large personal injury award, and so somebody is suddenly, in receipt of a significant amount of wealth, and they just haven't had those years of training or conversations or values clarification, or basic financial training. And so I think the problem with that, with sudden wealth without that training, is people will lose it. Like I think the stats are that if people receive these large inheritances without that training or preparation, it's going to be a very brief stewardship.
Absolutely. And it comes down to, the what we talked about with some of the failures in the transitions,
Hmm.
right? So The shock of sudden abundance. When heirs receive an inheritance without emotional or educational preparation, they often experience a distinct set of symptoms: intense guilt paranoia regarding the motives of friends and family, and an overwhelming fear of losing the capital. Cope with it. Sometimes to cope with the internal tension of feeling unworthy of the unearned wealth, unprepared heirs frequently engage in self destructive financial behaviors, either rapidly depleting the capital through impulsive spending or completely withdrawing from family relationships due to resentment and unmet expectations. So, this is where I think about what you just said and that conversation and how we need to be having these conversations through our lifetime so that when you do inherit, you can feel good about it and you have purpose in it. Have you have you had experience with this syndrome? Tell me your thoughts here, Nicole.
Well, so Heritage Trust, we have a few hundred million of assets under administration, and we have we are um, trustees of enormous amounts of wealth on behalf of individuals, and some of those are sudden wealth um, scenarios, and at least if we are the trustee, we are able to steward that for them, but we become somewhat parental in a way, so it can infantilize adults, right? When we're helping them set up budgets, investing it for them, saying no if they want to do imprudent spending. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily what people's idea of like human flourishing is. I mean, it has a role, but money is such a heavy and loaded topic, and people have such complicated feelings about it, and a lot of it comes from experiences of family of origin, like what the money story was in your family of origin, whether it was scarcity or abundance or and then there's this gendered component in that men in our society traditionally disproportionately controlled wealth, and that is rapidly changing. So there's roughly $1 trillion of wealth that's transferring in Canada right now as the baby boom generation is starting to pass away and those assets are being transferred. And a huge amount of that wealth transfer is actually going into the hands of women who historically have not been stewards of that wealth. And so that's a really interesting phenomenon, and the differences between the way women and men approach investing and spending and like I actually have kind of humorous experiences of this and that. I now do entirely trusts and estates work, but how we actually originally know each other, Jenny, was through the family law community. And for many years, I was a family law lawyer and mediator, and there was this actually hilarious phenomenon that I saw between women and men, and it was as follows: the if I had a female client who maybe had been home or had been working part time, largely doing caregiving, and the man had been more of the earner, she would often say to me, and this happened like multiple times, she would say, "Oh, well, he negotiates all day. And if we go into this mediation, he's a businessman. And I'm just worried he's just going to roll all over me because this is what he does all day." And I would say, you know what? Don't underestimate your skills. Don't underestimate your knowledge. And we're a team and we're going to go in and negotiate a fair and reasonable result. And then we would go into the mediation, and whether I was counsel or a mediator, there was such a funny phenomena, and that her perception was that he was going to be this major negotiator, and the men would often fall apart like cheap luggage. They would be so emotional, and the woman would be like a stone cold killer. And I don't know exactly what was going on, but this happened like more than once. And so I think women really underestimate their knowledge and their skills, or maybe I honestly am quizzical about what was going on because it happened more than once. Or maybe women had more communities to talk about their feelings and do unpacking before they went into this negotiation. And then maybe weren't as emotionally prepared, but women negotiated like strong and did a great job. And the male who was perceived to have more experience often did not negotiate as well in that scenario. So I think women can underestimate their skills and knowledge, and so it's going to be interesting to see what how things will change as more women do become holders and stewards of wealth, and what that's going to mean societally, and what that's going to mean in terms of investment. What are your thoughts about that, Jenny? Because you see that too.
Yeah, no, I do. I tell most women that to trust their gut, that they actually know what they need, and it's all there. Um, and to listen to it. And that also includes when you're sitting in front of your lawyer or your estate planning professional or your advisor, you can feel if it's a fit and if you can have those honest conversations. And building a team around you is the most important piece. And I'm sure that our audience is taking that away. That you need to have a team, and this like online stuff is not a team,
True.
right? So there's definitely that piece. And I think one of the things I'm taking away from this, I wanna bring this up, is that in order to receive and give your wealth through states, you actually want to empower your inheritor. You want to empower your children, and you want to be empowered by your parents so that when you do receive the funds, you have a really strong understanding of the origin story, the family values, and also money. You need to understand a little bit about money and what you want this to do for you or for your community or for your family. And I think that's the big thing that I'm hearing here is that you don't want sudden wealth syndrome. You don't want failure passing to the third generation. And if you're having those conversations and teaching, and listening to your gut, choosing a team and ensuring your team is helping you have those conversations. It's actually not, this is not that difficult. The difficulty is having them.
So yeah, so you just need to get started, and
Mhm.
I think yeah, there's a lot of energy around money and worthiness and and shame and it's a I think starting to have those open, transparent conversations is really important. And then if you have a family where there's conflict, which is many, many, many families, and maybe there's black sheep syndrome or and the golden child, or maybe there's child many, many, people have addiction and mental health issues, or maybe there's blended families. It's really important to get in front of that, because if you don't talk and you don't proactively plan, the reality is if there's a death or incapacity, you're just creating the the conditions for a conflict, which means money's going to be spent on lawyers, relationships are going to be damaged, there's going to be significant stress and delay and conflict. And if you think, you get up in the morning, you work really hard, you take care of your family, you're trying to contribute to the economy and the community, and it would be really sad that at the end of your life, if the legacy was that conflict. And we are we see, unfortunately, the families where there's failure, because quite often heritage trusts were appointed when there is significant litigation, when somebody's been removed as an executor or a trustee, when there are, pervasive mental health or substance issues. So we see a disproportionate amount of what doesn't work. And but I love the idea, Jenny, about conversations and having a team and being proactive, because there's so much you can do in advance to prevent that.
Yeah, I'm gonna share just my personal. So I am a blended family, and it's, been many years now, and my husband and I just, redid our wills, and we're actually gonna sit down with our 4 children and tell them what it looks like.
That's a great
And
idea.
and I don't know, and I obviously, I'm in the business, and I don't understand why families aren't talking more about money all along the way. I mean, I've been telling my children, if you want to live in Vancouver, this is how much money you need to earn, you
It's a
know,
lot.
and
It's a lot.
and it's a lot, and it doesn't
Yeah.
mean, and I mean, we still really need these valuable, um, teachers and nurses and 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 professions where it's actually hard to live in Vancouver. We
We
still
need our
need them. I'm not trying to say we should
need
all
our
go out and
paramedics, we need our police officers,
yes, exactly, but
we
I
need our
still
social
think
workers, we need these are the pillars
yeah.
of our teachers, like,
Yes. Yes, and, but it's still just I've been having these conversations with my kids a very long time. Why wouldn't I tell them what it looks like? And I really wanna share that with the audience because I do think if you can talk to them about it, you're not gonna have that conflict. If they've got questions and concerns, they think something's not fair, deal with it then. Deal with it when you're alive,
so
you know?
I'm exactly the same as you, Jenny, so we have a blended family, so my husband and I have 5 children together. He's got 3 from his first marriage, I have 2 from my first marriage, and our estate plan's not that complicated. We're basically leaving everything to each other, last to pass away equally to the 5 kids, but we are having proactive, transparent conversations with them to set expectations so they're not worried about it. And we are also working with professionals to make sure that we have the right paperwork in place because if we are incapable or pass away, we want the wonderful things about our family, the communication and the care and the values and the relationships to sustain. And so that's we're doing the same thing. We're doing proactive planning, but we're also basically saying to the kids, these are the decisions we've made. This is why, and we want you to know. And, even if they don't like it for whatever reason, because fair isn't necessarily equal all the time, right? Like maybe there's a child that has a major developmental disability and is going to need more money, or maybe you gave significant funds to one child for a professional degree and the other child has worked all the way through. Like there could be very legitimate reasons why you're going to do unequal distributions, but do not make that a surprise. Like have full transparent conversations because if the beneficiaries feel that they've been informed, if they feel like they've had a chance to contribute, if they understand the reasoning behind it, even if they're not 100% on side, it's so much less likely they're going to try to fight it if they feel like they've been heard and they've been talked to in advance.
100%.
Mhm. And
Um,
one more thing I want to say about unequal is like a lot of fishing and farm families. Like if you want to maintain that running farm or that fishing license and quota, for that business to survive to the next generation, there will not be an equal distribution because a lot of those families have significant wealth on paper, but they don't have a lot of cash on hand. So if there's one child that's worked on the family farm for 20 years and the intent is to leave that farm to that individual, there's things you can do with the other kids. You could give them the non-farm assets. You can try to use life insurance and other things, but there's going to have to be a conversation that it won't necessarily be equal, and do not make that a surprise.
yeah, well put. I want to just talk a little bit about trusts before we end our conversation today, and you did give us a good understanding. So, but um, from my experience, uh, m- uh, from my experience, one of the things I'm hearing, first of all, is that you do not actually want to be honored with being an executor of a will. It's a very difficult task. There's a very large legal and fiduciary responsibility to be such. So I want to touch just a little bit on that piece of um, what it actually looks like for someone when they become an executor, and also why people are starting to choose trusts more often because they are coming in, and even just that simple role of a trust doing the work sort of side by side or with you to make it easier on the executors of a will.
So I think I want to unpack that into two things. So number one, do you want a trust, which is a legal structure? And then number two, do you want a professional executor or trustee, which is often a trust company? So those are sort of distinct things. So I think I want to talk about trusts first. I think so. A trust is just a relationship where a individual or a company holds assets for the benefit of somebody else. Like that's it. A lot of people think trusts are only for wealthy families, but that's actually not correct. Like trusts are tools. And even if you're a middle class family, they may be a very appropriate tool. So the most common trusts that you see are you've got minor kids. And, in the event that the parents die while the kids are still minors, you're going to appoint a trustee. So that could be a family member, that could be a professional, that could be a company like Heritage Trust, but somebody else is going to hold the money and invest it and, pay bills on behalf of the beneficiary. So that's who may be a minor, or maybe they're an adult, but, I think we all know the 20s is kind of like the new teens. And so maybe you want to say, if we pass away, we don't want our 21-year-old to get the $1 million of our house equity. I don't think they're going to be ready yet. So you might appoint a family member or a trust company to hold that for them. And maybe money can be released for education or healthcare or whatever. And then maybe they get half at 25, balance at 30. Like that's pretty common. Maybe you've got a beneficiary that is disabled, or you've got somebody with serious mental health or substance issues, like many, many families. Same thing. You're not going to just give them $1 million outright. Uh, you're going to appoint a company or an individual to hold those funds. So those are very common uses of trusts. And those are what I've just mentioned are trusts that are created in wills, but trusts are just tools and they can be very effective. And then I think the flip side is a trust company. Is it appropriate that a company acts as your executor or trustee or power of attorney? So you've got to weigh the pros and cons, and the answers is going to be different for every family. So, you know, the good things about trust companies are it's going to be done professionally and correctly because it has to be. A trust company is neutral. So if you've got a blended family or you've got a bunch of conflict, they're not on any party's side. And then there's the continuity because we're regulated financial institutions where we're going to be like, even if you don't die for 40 years, the company is still going to be there. So that's the benefit, but the downsides is there is a fee, right? And so if you talk to a company and you can generally get a fee quote, so you've got to be, your estate's going to have to pay a fee for that service. And then the flip side of the professionalism is it's not as personal as a family member who's, known your family for decades and knows all the unique sort of idiosyncrasies and values, but maybe that's good, right? So you have to weigh the pros and cons and decide if that's the right solution for you. Probably 10 to 15% of people should consider a professional executor. And I would say the checklist is maybe you're a single person or you're a couple and you never had children. Very common. Maybe you've got disabled children and or beneficiaries and it's critical to have that long-term continuity. Maybe there's cross-border complexity. Like maybe there is a running business. Maybe the family's all fighting. So if you fit those checklists, there very much might be a role for that. And so I think if you're thinking about it, talking to somebody like you, Jenny, or talking to your financial advisor or your lawyer or your accountant, they can talk to you about it and then they can give you referrals. And then if you are thinking about a trust company, there's sort of two lanes. So you can go with one of the bank affiliated trust companies. And that's usually a fit if you already have if you already have most of your investments inside a financial institution, it often will make sense to appoint the trust company affiliated with that financial institution. But if you have your investments spread across different investment advisors, or you're with an independent investment advisor, or maybe there is like a lot of complexity and conflict. Sometimes the big bank trust companies they don't take riskier things. So if you're independent or in many different financial institutions, or there is particularly a lot of issues, you're probably going to want to talk to an independent trust company. So,
Which is what you are,
which is
correct?
what we are. So
Yes.
we're
Yeah.
not affiliated with any particular bank. And if you want to research who those are, what you can do is every province, well, there's federal regulation. So OSFI is the federal regulator, but also every province has a provincial regulator. So, for example, in British Columbia, the provincial regulator of trust companies is called the BCFSA, BC Financial Services Authority. If you go on their website, you can look at all the independent trust companies on their website. And if somebody has that license, it's really hard to get that license. It's very expensive. It's very onerous. It's extremely rigorous, as it should be. So anybody who has that license is going to be a good option to consider as a potential independent trust company for your family.
Amazing. That's really helpful. Um, I want to just wrap up a couple of really key points that came out of this for me and for our audience. One of them is rough and ready, get something done, start that conversation, go see a notary, go see a lawyer, make sure that you have a will and that you're making the minimal decisions at the very least about what's going to happen and saving your family from a lot of issues along the way. Number two, it is our responsibility to have conversations with our parents and with our children about money, about values, about our family, and that really there is this wonderful legacy which we have an opportunity to build within our families. And I think we're missing that by not having by being afraid to talk about money instead of saying no. We have this wonderful opportunity in first world to have impact on our children, our grandchildren, and we need to start having those conversations today so that we can use that resource in such a positive way.
Yeah, it's really
N-
important.
And number three, pick your advisors, right? So much of what you said today, Nicole, said to me, you know, there's a lot to learn about how you choose your trustees, a trust, the different mechanisms that can be in place, the different structures. And, you're 25 years, you've gone to law school. There's so much that's gone into how you understand all of this. And a layperson shouldn't understand it. Their advisor can sit down and say, "Hey, is this something that we need to talk about? Do you want to learn about trusts? Is it something that we need to teach you about so that we can then refer you on to somebody like Nicole and Heritage Trust if it's a fit?" And you can then have that discussion. And I'm sure that you do have those initial consults with people to see if it's a fit to work with you,
Hmm.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we do free consultations, and you could actually book them right on our website. And so we will chat with people and listen to their situation, listen to their goals. And if we are a potential fit, we can tell them and give them a quote, but sometimes we're not. And if we're not a fit, then we can tell them that, and then give them resources of where they can go.
Amazing. So I have one last question for you, which is however you want to approach it. I always like to know from our guests what has been one of your most influential or significant money decisions in your lifetime? Like,
Yeah. You know,
it doesn't have to be about this, just like something that was like an aha for you that you want to maybe share with our audience that felt like it had a lot of impact in your life.
so it's funny, I actually haven't really talked about this publicly before, but the genesis of Heritage Trust actually comes from loss and what not to do. So I have a family that where succession unfortunately didn't go as smoothly as it might have. So, my grandfather, Dick Garton, started Big and Tall men's stores and was a successful entrepreneur, built a really successful business. He died unexpectedly at 46 in a plane crash and died without a will. And the unfortunate result of that lack of planning was the succession um, resulted in a breach in the family. And my father, unfortunately, didn't have a relationship with his family. And that was an incredibly sad result. And then my own father was a successful lawyer and developer and died unexpectedly in his late 40s. And I would say his estate was less than stellar. So I have unfortunately witnessed twice in my life where succession through a lack of proactive planning didn't go well. And part of the genesis of Heritage Trust is through that lived experience and through all my years as working with families as a lawyer and then starting Heritage Trust is to take that learning and experience and education and try to take a leadership role to help families where whether they're in that scenario where there has been a sudden death to help the family resolve the legal, tax, and family issues, but preferably to be part of that proactive discussion so that that wealth transfer is successful and that wealth is maintained. And by I mean that globally, like the human piece, the relationships, the social piece, like the spiritual
Philanthropic
piece,
piece,
and
spiritual.
that the legacy of hard work is going to be is building those relationships and continuity and not having loss. And by I mean that global loss. So that is the genesis of, so my money decision, I guess, was starting Heritage Trust with those life experiences and trying to do better for other families.
Amazing. That's your why.
That is my why.
That's your
Mhm.
why. Thank you.
And that's the
Thank you for
first time
that.
I've actually shared that. And
Wow.
so it's a privilege to share that on your podcast, Jenny.
Thank you, Nicole. It's all about finding the meaning in these decisions that we make. That's what's key. So everyone can find you at Heritage Trust.
Yes.
Just Google Nicole Garton at
If you
Heritage Trust.
Google Heritage Trust, you'll find us.
There you go.
Right now, we just serve BC families, although we are extra provincially registering in Alberta. And so very shortly, we will also be serving Alberta families as well.
Wonderful. So, for those of you listening, if today's episode helped you gain a little more clarity on your own financial journey, please take a moment to support the show. Our, on our podcast page, you can find access to our research, our guests, and participate in our poll. The best way to help us grow is to subscribe on your favorite platform and leave a review. It truly helps other deliberate, savvy women find this community. And also tell your friends about this episode. This is an opportunity to share with your family so you can start the conversation if you haven't. Um, I think that, Nicole and I are at similar ages and stages, and this is very topical for what I call the sandwich generation and where we're at. And a lot of responsibility. I hope everybody heard that. Remember, your resources are your tools. Use them to create meaning and build your best life. Let's build conscious money choices today. I'm Jenny Weeks, and I'll see you on the next episode.